Hi friends, welcome back. So what the heck is going on with Apple stock? Why is Warren Buffett selling? And what does Apple tech have in store for the future? That's the subject of today's video, and let's jump right in. So first, Apple stock's had a pretty good year, up 33% year to date. But the headline's really been not necessarily that Apple stock has been up, but that Warren Buffett has been selling. I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines. We've been talking about many times on the channel. This is an interesting chart to show this is where Apple stock has been in terms of a percentage of Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio throughout the years. He first picked it up in 2016, and you can see the Apple portion of the portfolio just keeps growing and growing and growing. At one point, it was almost 50% of their holdings, and hence they've been selling off the stock, and now it's closer to around under 30% of their holdings. Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett have been sitting on approximately 30% cash. So if you're curious what Apple has, or I should say Warren Buffett has, they have a bunch of cash. They still have a bunch of Apple stock, but they have been selling. We'll see if they sell more in 2025. Now, Apple's got to convince Warren Buffett and Wall Street to buy the stock. That's what this game is all about. And it's interesting because coming out in the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg today were reports on what's Apple plans are for the future. And essentially, they're trying to convince Wall Street, hey, am I pretty now? Am I good enough for you? Will you invite me to the dance? And let's see what you guys think, and I'll show you what Apple is going to be up to. These are the headlines today. Apple plans thinner foldable iPhones to revive growth, right? That's the name of this game, is how can they convince you that they're going to be growing their revenue and their earnings in the future. And you also got this, Apple's new vision for computing is a giant foldable iPad. If you want to look at Apple's valuation, the PE ratios are in the 30s, pegs at 3, so you could certainly suggest that Apple is a bit overvalued, right? I say a bit. We always pay a premium for Apple because they do have very consistent revenue and earnings, but they are facing a lot of pressure from competition like they haven't had in the past. If you look at Wall Street projections for Apple, the lowest projection would be like a downside of 19%. The highest projection would be like a upside of 10%. So that's what you're looking at with Apple. And also I want to show you guys this. Apple is currently the largest market cap company in the world, so don't ever get the impression that Apple's failing. They're clearly a successful company. Just the question is how much more growth can they have going into next year? The other top companies in the world in terms of market cap, that's the size, that's NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet. Tesla is at number 8, but I do want to point out something where Tesla is a bit, well, I'll say a bit, I'll say a lot overvalued, because in comparison, if you compare, say, revenue, Tesla isn't even in the top 10. Apple is on this list, number 7. Walmart and Amazon are 1 and 2. They generate a lot of revenue. I'm talking about Walmart and Amazon, but their margins aren't as good as Apple's, right? So essentially, Walmart and Amazon's plan is like, just keep shipping those, cheap products in and out. Thin margins, do heavy volume. Apple has a lot better margins. If you want to look at earnings, this is what's really interesting. Saudi Aramco is at the top. Then you got Berkshire Hathaway, Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And Tesla's nowhere to be found in the top 10. In fact, Tesla's at 146 on this chart. Apple generates on this chart. There's different ways you can look at this, but earnings at 123 billion. Tesla is 8 billion. So this is sort of why when we talk about Tesla being overvalued, the PE ratios are way out of whack, meaning you're paying way too much for how much Tesla actually makes. Now, in terms of phone, remember that headline was, hey guys, new foldable iPhones, new foldable iPads. That's where Apple's growth theoretically is going to be. I'll just say this flat out, Apple, I want my flippy phone. I keep saying that. I'm old, I'm 49. I always mention my age because it depends on, your exposure to which tech and which tech you like the most. My favorite phone of all time, and you guys can agree or disagree, was the Razr. I absolutely loved this phone. It was just really fun. It was like having a Star Trek communicator, right? And the thing was like a physical phone. It wasn't, there's glass on there, obviously, or plastic, or you want to call it, but there was a screen. But the hard shell on the back just made it feel more durable, and I just really liked it. I flipped that thing all the time. It was like really fun. These days, the flippy phones, I've seen them in the stores, and I guess every brand's got one except for Apple. So Apple's last to the game in terms of flippy phone. The big problem in design of these things is the crease. And then we also have a few people in the community that said they've either had these phones or work and repair these phones, And I'm talking about just any of the foldable phones, and there's a problem with they're easily damaged. So I'll be curious your guys' thoughts on this stuff. For me, I think it's a little bit ugly, to be perfectly frank. So how can they solve this thing? Maybe just go back to this physical buttons, that kind of thing. But I think the companies these days, I don't know, maybe the consumers don't want physical buttons. I myself like it, but that's just me. So foldable phones is one way they could go, right? Apple just announced their Apple Mini. We've actually seen these things in the store. If you haven't seen these things, they're really small. And I personally think this is actually a pretty good computer for a lot of people. But I will concede it depends what operating system that you're used to. So for me, I've been using Apple now for years, so it'll be hard for me to change because I'm just so used to how it is. And whenever I look at Windows, I'm like totally lost. Even though I know how to use Windows, I'm just don't use it that often. So that's always an interesting question, like how many people can convert to getting over to their computer system. However, in terms of iOS, which is different than their Mac operating system, that's very intuitive for people, which is just very different. And many phones kind of are roughly the same. So I don't, even though I think this is a pretty good computer, it may not necessarily move the bar for them. Apple tried to go with their goggle thing. I think these were called the Vision Pros. In my opinion, this was definitely a flop. They were just too expensive. I think they were $3,500. Here in Korea, I haven't even seen them. They're not in the stores, and there might be somewhere in town. I haven't even seen it. I just don't think there's enough demand for stores to even carry these things. Again, they're 3,500. It's just too much for the average person. And even in this house, like I like tech, but it's just I don't want to wear it. And are there enough applications? And do I want to hold up my arms to be doing this all day? Not really. That's just me. And I'll be curious what people think about this. I have heard people say they do like their. I think it's called the Meta Quest. I think that's from Zuckerberg and the team. And they're moving pretty far along on that. So there's a lot of competition in this goggle space. Or I guess headset space, but they're still too heavy. They're still too expensive. But eventually we'll get there. And I think eventually when these things get to be more like glasses, we'll probably see more of this kind of stuff. It was interesting too, and I want to read a little description of the article. This is from Bloomberg, what they're saying about Apple, and you get a sense of what it is. It says here, Apple designers are developing something akin to a giant iPad that unfolds into the size of two iPad Pros side by side. The Cupertino, California-based company has been honing the product for a couple of years now and is aiming to bring something to market around 2028. So that's pretty late, right? And what would it be, 2025 next year? So 3 years now, they're looking at like two iPads are going to be like foldy, I guess. And that, I mean, in 3 years from now, who knows? The market could totally change. Do we want two iPads together? Who knows? This is an example of what it might look like, something like this. Do you need something like that? One of the things that I've used iPads, I've just never bought one. I just don't have a real need for it. Is when I have a keyboard. I want the ergonomics of a keyboard. Because like just typing on a flat screen isn't great. And anyone who's done it, I'm sure you guys know. So they're really more for consumption. Now, theoretically, the Apple Pen is sort of why you get these, but do people really want a two foldy screen iPad? That's the question. Microsoft tried something kind of similar back in 2020. What were they calling this? I don't remember. It was called the Neo. I think they ended up canceling it. And it's funny when you look at the design of this old Neo, and this is Microsoft's thing back in it was like 2020. It had a little touch screeny at the above the keyboard. Apple tried the touch screeny above the keyboard on their MacBooks. I think it was a fail for them. I think it might have only been like 1 or 2 years. And I remember seeing the things when they came out, and you had to pay like $300, $400 extra for it, and just there wasn't really any push to do that. Apple has also been flirting with, and now and it's funny because in today's article it wasn't mentioned. I've seen it mentioned in prior Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal articles, and this shows you how Apple is like floating out ideas to Wall Street to see what sticks. I'm showing you a picture of this is Amazon's. I don't remember what this thing was called even. We'll call it Gizmo or whatever. You guys can type in the comments what it was. I just don't remember because I think this failed for Amazon. Facebook Meta, I think they were developing a kind of thing like this. So basically, it's like an iPad on top of like a little wheeled robot body thing. And the basic idea would be it runs around your house or sits on your kitchen counter and runs around your counter and you can talk to it. It can show you recipes, show you whatever TV show, do video calls. So the idea isn't crazy. I don't think it's crazy to have like this little robot run around the house if you want to do vid chats. But in this day and age, we're so used to just holding our phones. If the cost of this thing is, well, let's say it costs $500, I don't know how wide of appeal it'll be. And then the other thing is too, just look at the design of this thing. It is kind of low to the ground. So in order to make it more appealing, you'd want it to be like at, eye level, like couch level, basically, where you're just sitting. And actually here in Korea, you do see these kind of designs to where it's like basically a TV on wheels, and you can just like push it around. So that stuff has been popular. But will Apple go this sort of iPad robot thing? That remains to be seen. Let me read a little bit more. It's actually kind of interesting to hear what they say here. Right now, Apple's largest iPad tops out at 13 inches. So that's how big these things are. Apple knows that customers, gamers, software developers, or just people watching movies want the biggest screen possible. And the only way to sensibly ship a mobile product with a large display, one approaching 20 inches or so, is to make it foldable. Otherwise, it's hard to throw it into a purse or a backpack. So, because the question is like, well, why don't you just make a really big iPad? Because essentially, you're designing these for people who want these on the go, right? Throw it in your backpack. And this is always a fascinating thing to where something like the phone, there's always going to be eventually probably like a one size that we all want. Now, or at least two sizes. I think the problem with many of these phone companies are offering way too many sizes, and I think it eats into their market a little bit too much. They cannibalize their own shares. And one thing that I was thinking about, say with this razor back then, there was one razor. That's the one that you got. And so, in my opinion, I think you could go with phones these days. Just go like, hey, you get a big one and a small one, and I guess theoretically a middle one. But I just feel like there's so many options, and I've been in the store many times where everyone's looking at like, okay, so which one do I get? So I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But the idea that Apple's been pushing these days is in order to make money, they want you to buy multiple devices. So they want you to buy a tablet, they want you to buy a phone, they want you to buy a computer, and they want you to buy a watch. They want you to buy a headset. They also have in this headset, like in your eyes, and they have like earphones, earbuds, et cetera, et cetera. Like they keep expanding more and more products, but sometimes they do R&D on stuff and they just totally flop. So this is where it seems like Apple is directionless, opposed to in the past. If you guys remember Steve Jobs, he'd come out with like, hey, this is the big product of the year or whatever, or the big product every couple of years. It wasn't like we're just throwing you like, 3 things a year and see what works. And it just seems like Apple, like I said, it seems more directionless than they were in the past. If you ever wonder why Apple seems different, it's because they're throwing you more stuff out there and not everything is a mega hit. Now, to be fair to Apple, their streaming thing has actually been pretty good. So Apple Plus TV or Apple TV Plus, whatever they call this thing, they actually have some pretty good program there. Recently, we've been watching Silo. That's the new show. If you guys haven't seen it, it's pretty good. Severance isn't bad. And I'm sure there's other stuff on there that I've been seeing. I think we watched the video game show on there, like the first couple of seasons. It was about like a video game company. I can't remember. Maybe Mythic Quest or something like that. You guys can remind me, and I could be wrong if that's Apple. And then I think the Lasso show is on there, which some people like as well. Also, things that's going on with Apple is Tim Cook. Timmy, he actually went to my school, so I don't know him personally, but I know people who know him, and everyone says he's a nice guy, so I'll just assume that's true. But Tim, he actually met with Donald Trump down at, I call it Mars Largo, and I don't know if he's meeting with Musk also. And Tim Cook and Musk is an interesting one because there was always that rumor, and I think it might be true actually, that Apple could have bought Tesla way back in the day. So who knows? But Tim met with Trump, and essentially, I think this is a big deal for them, is the tariff situation. It could really, 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 really hurt Apple because they, get a lot of parts from China. Their phones are made in China. It's at the Foxconn factory. It's actually in Shenzhen. I actually write about it in my book because I used to work in Shenzhen. You can find my book. It's called Positive Angle. It's on Amazon. But if the tariffs that Trump wants to put in really go in effect, and it's like 100% tariffs on stuff from China, it would raise the cost of your iPhone considerably. The last time I checked, I think it might be like $300 to $400 increase, something of that nature. Because not everything would be in your phone would necessarily be from China, because it would be like parts from China and then maybe some parts from USA and then assembled in assembled in USA or whatever, however they decide to mix that stuff around. So that's something that Apple's been rumored to do also, is introducing their new sort of chips. And again, this could be to get around the tariffs, perhaps. I'll read the description. You guys can hear this. So it says, the big picture here is that Apple is trying to add as many hardware product variations as possible. That's what I mentioned before. They got too much crap. And this also mentioned as well is talking about in-house chips. It says Apple's other major chip shift and in-house Wi-Fi and Bluetooth component, right? In-house. So that would replace the components from, I guess, Qualcomm and from Broadcom. So they're going to try to do their own in-house Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. The other thing too, which is kind of an interesting one, the article mentioned that if you guys are Apple fans, you'll know this, that they're coming out with a new Apple mouse. It may be someday, closer than not. This design, that's something that if you guys ever use this thing, it's just really an awful design. When it first came out, it was pretty cool because it had like a touchy pad on the top, so no wheel, and you would just kind of slide your finger. And like at the time, the tech was cool, but then after like using too much, it's just too flat. And again, it's not ergonomic. And then when you would charge the thing, you had to plug it like on the bottom of the mouse, so you couldn't use the mouse while you're charging it. It was a terrible design. So they may come out with something new, and we'll see. And I'd actually like them to redesign their keyboard as well. So again, not everything that they put out is absolutely fantastic. And then the latest announcement they have is the Apple Watch. I guess it's going to run on satellite now, so you can send text from that. So that's what's going on with Apple. They got a lot of stuff in the works. They've canceled their car, so that's not happening. And they also too, they're under restrictions from I'm sorry, what to say, like they're getting more regulated, is a good way to say it, in Europe regarding their app store, because essentially they want to take a cut from everyone's money from the app store. And we'll see if something like that happens in the USA. My understanding of it, though, if Lena Khan does end up exiting from the FTC, she's no longer chair, but if she ends up exiting from the FTC, you'll probably see a lot more sort of positive things for Apple in terms of monopoly kind of things. But we'll see. That's why Timmy is meeting with Mr. Donald Trump. So anyway, that's what's going on with Apple. I'd like to hear your thoughts on any one of these things. What do you think about their foldable phones? What do you want about the two iPads together? What do you think about their computer sales and anything else that they're offering? And what products would you like to see from Apple that they don't have already? That's my thoughts on this. I'd like to hear yours, and I'll catch you all in the next video.